Glad you could join me today. We're introducing our structure fishing workshop. We're going to be entering into a study that's really going to last all summer long and on into the future, as long as the Lord's willing. We're going to be doing workshops. My idea behind all of this, and the main reason I sort of come out of retirement, is because I'm really interested in educating the new generation of fishermen. I haven't been very happy with what I've been seeing over the last 15 years. A lot of the promotion that's being done with our sport is all centered around competitive fishing, the bass tournaments. And because all of the bass tournaments, I mean all of the bass tournaments, are held during the spawning season. They're in different locations, but if you really examine where the tournaments are being held, they sort of follow the spawn. Start in southern Florida in early February, come to central Florida mid-February, then in March in southern Alabama, and they're ending up, I think the big series is ending up in South Carolina in March. Well, that's the spawning season. And anybody that's ever done any fishing understands that the fish are in the shallows during the spawning season. So everything that's being publicized today, ESPN, name it, wherever you go, and where you're hearing about fishing today, it's all based around tournament fishing. But where are the serious fishermen that are fishing not just a few weeks in the spring during the spawn, but for the rest of the entire season? Where do they get their information? Where are you going to go fishing, and how are you going to catch fish during the summer months when they're no longer up in the shallows in 2 feet of water? And that's what I'm going to be covering. But I want to set the foundation for the information. I wanted to set this up first so that you know what value there is in this information. Where does this value come from? And the only way I can tell you is to start where it started, where the information started, where the facts about a fish were first discovered. There was a fella named Elwood Perry. He's better known as Buck Perry. All of the basic facts that he writes about and that he taught the fishing world, the facts that actually revolutionized what we know today as modern day fishing, the entire nomenclature, every terminology that's used today, it was all started by Buck Perry. He really and truly revolutionized modern day fishing. But he told me he had all of these theories about a fish, what turned out to be the facts that we work with today. He had those theories completely in his mind, all of the basic important stuff, by age 17. Like I said, 200 IQ. He was a genius. He's the kind of person who comes around once in a century. But it just so happened this guy was interested and passionate about our favorite sport. And when I first met him in 1970, he had made his discoveries, and he had been traveling from one end of the country to the other end of the country, fishing all of these different lakes, rivers, reservoirs, all tidal basins and sloughs, and he was doing it for about 25 years before I met him. And after he had proven his basic theories about a fish, he wrote a book, this book. But the first time I met him and had a fishing experience, if you haven't seen it, go to my webpage and look at the first blog I did a few months ago, telling about the day I met Buck Perry. Took me fishing in half a day. We caught 55 of the biggest bass I'd ever seen in my life, and we were out in the middle of the lake, out in deep water. He had me convinced, he had me hooked, so to speak, in 3 hours of fishing. I knew that everything he said was right. It all made sense. It was logical and everything else. And for some reason, I'm happy to say, he took a liking to me. I don't know why, because everybody doesn't like me. But he took a liking to me, and he said, I'm going to give you this book. And he said, if you really want to get good, you study this book. I studied that book. After I met him in Florida, I went back to my home area. You can maybe see today I'm sporting my colors. I was a stockbroker in Pennsylvania, Pittsburgh. Grew up there, hunting and fishing with my dad. Loved the sport, but in the summer months, hardly ever caught a fish. When I met Buck and had that success in that one morning, I couldn't stop reading and studying and fishing my home lakes up around Pittsburgh. Every time I went out, I was catching big fish. So I would send Mr. Prairie the pictures and say, man, this book really works. It really does. I'm so convinced, I'm so excited, I'm telling everybody I know about it. So Buck got excited about me, and he invited me on a couple of other trips. And it didn't matter where we went. Didn't matter what lake, reservoir, didn't matter what it was. Everywhere we went, it wouldn't be about a half hour, sometimes 5 minutes, but sometimes a half hour, an hour. We'd be in a school of big fish, catching big fish. And I couldn't get enough of it. I was so excited. I can't even explain it to you. I couldn't even keep my mind on business. And I had a pretty good business. And all of a sudden, after about a year of joining Buck on different trips, he confided in me that he was looking for someone that might be interested in carrying on his work once he retired. And he said he hadn't had anybody apply for that job yet. And I said, well, I might be interested in something like that, but I don't know how in the heck I'd make a living. He said, oh, well, you come to work for me, I'll pay you a salary. I don't mind sharing with you. 1972, my salary was $500 a month. Now, I know y'all laughing. I kind of laughed too, but I did it. I gave up my brokerage business and went to work for $500 a month. But I was apprenticeshipping under the greatest fisherman who ever lived. He was my personal mentor. I'm fishing with him all over the country, learning my trade. So over the next 3 years, we traveled and we fished every major river in this country. We fished the Ohio, we fished the Susquehanna, the Ohio. We just kept on moving out. And then we got to the Mississippi, fished the Mississippi from all the way up into Minnesota, all the way down to where it dumps into the bay. And then we went out west and we fished the Yellowstone, the Madison, we fished the Snake River, fished it for trout, and then we went down and fished Hell's Canyon for smallmouth, and then we went out and fished Columbia River for trout, salmon, and walleye. We fished all of the rivers. We fished every type of reservoir, lowland 1, lowland 2, lowland 3, lowland 4. We fished flatland 1s and 2s. We fished delta reservoirs. We fished highland 1, 2, and 3. We fished every reservoir known to man, all of the natural lakes, tidal basins, tidal sloughs, ponds. He had me fish everything. If there was water, I had to go fishing. And finally, in 1978, he said, Donald, again, this was over dinner. He said, I think you've graduated. You've got your doctorate degree in catching fish. So I smiled. And he said, so now we're going to really get busy. So in 1979, we did our first summer on the water school. It was an 8-week school. And each week we'd have 50 to 75 new people come to the class. We'd teach them, and they'd leave out on a Saturday morning after breakfast, and Sunday, as the plane goes overhead, on Sunday morning, a new group would come in, and we did that for 8 weeks every summer for 20 years. But because of the social media, my wife clued me into it. She said, you know, you can go ahead and start teaching people like you used to, the 1-day clinic, the 2-day school. You can teach them on the water. You can do all that today with social media. And when she started explaining how that was possible, I got interested. And again, for a second reason I get interested, because I'm not happy with the state of modern day fishing. Buck Prairie, the father of modern day fishing, has pretty much been forgotten. Forgotten if you look at the news, or if you look for some place to find some educational material. He's been forgotten. And I personally don't want to see that. So as long as I'm still kicking, I'm going to be teaching. I'm hoping that as we begin our study of what makes a fish tick and how you and I can catch them, not catch them every once in a while, but catch them all the time, every time we go fishing, catching big stringers of big fish. We're going to have to do a little study because, as Buck said, knowledge is the key to fishing success. It says it right on the front of his book. Knowledge is the key to fishing success. No truer words were ever spoken. The actual trolling or casting and doing some of those physical things that you do out there to catch fish, that's the easy part. There's nothing to that. But you have to base yourself in the knowledge. And the good news is Buck Prairie gave us the knowledge. All we have to do is take it in. So I want you to understand, as we enter into this discussion, first we're going to deal with structure. All the 17 different types. And then we're going to be talking about weather and water conditions. We're going to be talking about lake types. We're going to be talking about mapping structure. We're going to be talking about presentation of lures and boats and motors. We're going to talk about everything. It's going to be a continual workshop. But we're beginning with structure. So this is what I wanted to tell you today. It's not Don Dickson telling you. It's Buck Prairie telling you. I'm telling you what the scientific fact is that's been proven by Buck Prairie fishing for 70 years all over the United States, one end of the country to the other, in every type of water, under any and all situations, and followed up by me, who did it for 40 years. Fished all over the United States, everywhere, all species of fish. People read my blog, they say, well, are you a bass fisherman? I say, yeah. Are you a walleye fisherman? Yeah. Do you ever fish for muskie? Yeah. I fish for fish. And the good news is, if you have this information, you go about your fishing like I do. I go about my fishing in the same manner every day, regardless of lake type, regardless of species of fish, regardless of time of year. I'm going about my fishing exactly the same way. And you can too. So when we get into our study, I want you to know we're going to be talking about scientifically proven facts. It's not my opinion. It's facts that have been proven over the last 70 or 80 years. And I'm excited to get started. So do me a favor, like us on Facebook and subscribe to my YouTube channel and join me for this study on what makes a fish tick and how the heck we gonna catch it.